powders to create things, we also use them to cover them. Specific use that I'm going to display right now is for ships. We are in Miami, right, where we have a lot of ships that need a lot of repairs due to the salt water corrosion. So this is perfectly helps them to be more sustainable and cheaper repairs. We have also one of the best manufacturing systems developed by humanity so far, which is the wire arc additive manufacturing, right? It combines these 3D printing techniques with this new manufacturing system to create the cheapest repair system that we have ever created. And finally, we have the friction stir. The friction stir is like when you're baking a cake, you're stirring the mix, or you want to add this frosting to the top of the cake. So basically 3D printing while you're stirring the metallic powders together. So again, we can apply these to aircrafts. So that's why we're trying to work directly with the Department of Defense, right? We can apply it to ships. This is more of a commercial aspect that is very useful in coastal cities like Miami itself. Again, this is a technology that will help us to improve and reduce the costs of repairs. And as I said, it's just like baking a cake. Now, who is Arvind Agarwal? Arvind Agarwal is the main researcher and scientist that is working in this project at FIU. He started his career in the industry, so his way of teaching this new technology is by applying the direct theory into practice for industry. He's trying to remove that middle stage in which the student is trying to learn how to do it. You are learning while you're doing it, all right? So there are 4 main elements that Arvind likes to share with us. The first one is there is a point of need in 3D printing for metallic parts. And that is that in combat, when you have a tank, when you have a ship, right, an aircraft, and it's damaged, it takes a lot of time for the Army engineers, the Navy engineers to repair it. So we need to reduce that time. That's the point of need. This is a security measure. It's a defensive measure to be able to repair as fast as possible, right? We also need a very important thing, which is protective coatings, right? For space missions, right? Because we need to protect our ships, our spaceships from radiation and space dust, which is very corrosive. But however, there are 2 elements that we need to cover before we go on to dream so far, right? Which is we need to make sure that we have the workforce to be able to work with it, right? And of course, we need the certifications because all these repair pieces that we're creating need to be certified, and we need to make sure they have the qualifications to be sustainable and safe for their use. That's why we require partnership with 2 things. And the first one is the Department of Defense. As a matter of fact, today, Dr. Arvind Agarwal, Carlos Becerra, and myself went to the Pentagon, in which we met with Dr. Stephen G. Wax. Right? Initially, we were working with Barbara McQuiston, but fortunately for her, she was transferred to NATO early this month. So now our partnership is directly with Dr. Stephen G. Wax, and we managed to get him to create connections between us and the industrial-based policy and, of course, Mantech. With this, FIU will secure the opportunity and the possibility to increase both funding, man-force, and research to create a more feasible facility that is already in construction and the engineering center. Now, but of course, we need to make sure that we have the money for this. What we have been doing is nothing less than working with the Senator Marco Rubio, the Representative Demi Weissman-Schultz, and Mario Diaz-Balart. For the fiscal year of 23, right, the Senate has requested for us $10 million for the project of RAD, which is the Rapid Additive Manufacturing, the cold spray. And we're also working alongside with both representatives to get around $10 million as well for WAM, which is the Wire Arc Additive Manufacturing System that will ensure that FIU is a pioneer on the fastest and more efficient manufacturing system that humanity has ever created. And everything that's possible thanks to FIU in Washington, D.C., and the effort that we all doing here. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I know we have our guest judge right here. So
Judge.
we'll let you get the first question.
Do judges?
He's not a judge. Yes, listener.
Okay, so the first question is, so what's the history of this technology? Okay, so the one missing piece that I see is, where is this technology at right now, and where else is being used? Okay.
Yes. Hello? Okay. This technology has been in development since the beginning of this century, right? Dr. Arvin Awal has shared with me how he has been working with this for more than 20 years, being his specialization materials engineer, right? What it has been able to produce, and you can see here in this facility, is actually getting to the point that it is feasible to create 3D printed objects, right? We have here in display just a FIU logo printed with these metallic powders, but that's just one of the things that is possible. That's our FIU. The reason why we're cooperating with the DoD and with Congress is because we are aware that other countries, like for example Australia, have been able to create, let's call it a compact facility that is transportable, right? In which the Army is able to produce pieces for repairs while they're in the field. So that's where we want to get at, right? Right now, we're in the process of we're getting materials like the powder from other universities that we have cooperation with, but they entrust us with the development of the technology to be able to compete with those technologies that already exist around the world. Because there are only 3 places right now in the world that are working with this technology by themselves, which is Japan, Germany, and here in California. So we want to be the first one in Florida, and of course, to be the best one in the United States.
Anyone else have any questions? Go ahead, Mary.
I guess like your meeting at the, I don't know, your meeting at the Pentagon, what were the outcomes today? Kind of like, how did it go?
Hello? I don't think it's working now. Well, as you can see right here, when we met with Dr. Wax, who's the man right here, we were able to meet with another one of his partners, right? And basically, what they told us is what we already knew. The Department of Defense is not going to be there just to sign checks for FIU, right? What we wanted to do was to create this partnership and this network with them so that it is easier for FIU to get in contact with these 2 things, which is ManTech, right, and the digital-based policy. With them is when we can now build this workforce between FIU researchers and DoD researchers, and now get probably some obviously more leverage, because it is easier for us as FIU to come to congressmen and congresswomen and say, listen, we are not waiting for you to tell us, hey, we can give you this appropriation. No, we're going to the agencies. We're making these partnerships. So when we present to you the project, you already see that we have a network that is going to be successful. And so you can be confident saying, all right, we're going to give you this appropriation. So these 2 elements right here are going to be key for the success of this project. And of course, when the center for cold spray at FIU in the Engineering Center back in Miami is finished in the late summer of 2023, then the leverage is going to be very good. Whenever we want to talk to congressmen, they're going to be seeing a feasible project that is already existing. Yeah.
Anyone else have a question? Or I get the last question. My question is, so what recommendations would you have if we want to continue this project? So say another Hamilton scholar came in to help with the continuation of this, what would be your recommendation?
Yes. Well, the first recommendation I will do, based on my experience so far, is the first thing, it took me a little bit longer to be able to meet with the Department of Defense, specifically because the person who was in charge, Barbara McQuiston, got transferred to NATO, right? So it restarted the progress and it delayed for like a month. But before even getting with Barbara McQuiston, it took me a lot of time to get with her, because most of these agencies, specifically security agencies, take a little bit of time to upload and update, how their staff changes, right? So in order to get to this person, it took me like 5 calls that will take me in a circle to the same person at the beginning. So I will say take advantage of the resources that FIU in Washington DC give you at the beginning, specifically for the contacts, because that's the hardest part, to be honest. And the second thing is how you approach people in the agencies you want to reach out to. You gotta be friendly, you gotta be grateful, but and don't be afraid to be insistent. That's the main thing I would say. At the beginning, I was kind of hesitant to be insistent, but this is how you gotta do things. They gotta see that you are looking for a result, for an outcome, and you gotta push for it. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, thank you, Carlos. Who's next? I know, wait, Lily, you wanna go? Oh, he's in another room, okay.
Hi everyone, my name is Lillian Latchman. I am a Hamilton Scholar here at FIU in DC. I am planning to graduate this next 15 or 14 days or so we're all counting down the days, right? And this is my project on federally funded health research for FIU. My ultimate ask was to look at the future of federally funded research toward FIU's HWCOM, so the College of Medicine, the College of Public Health, College of Nursing and Health Sciences, looking at FIU's RCMI, the Research Centers for Research Centers for Minority Institutions, and CCF, so the Center for Children and Families, as well as just any other health departments that FIU contains, such as the one in Port St. Lucie for the Center of Translational Science. Just looking at the future of the research for that and seeing how we are able to synchronize them with agencies like HHS and NIH. Why do we want to do this? First and foremost, FIU from a health perspective, we do have a lot of opportunities for a quote-unquote natural lab at FIU. We do have community partnerships with the students and between the community. From a global perspective, we do mission trips, for example. That's one thing I can think of at the top of my head right now. But global perspectives cover a broad range of just looking at FIU students that come in from different countries with different knowledges, different experiences, and what public health is to them. And then lastly, from a solutions perspective, we have had local innovations that lead to FIU successes in health research. FIU does have areas of growth within their health research, so to not name everything off the slide, I just wanted to put it there for awareness. We want to take the first, let's say, first two, brain health and the environment, and the neighborhood health program. We can look at the College of Public Health and HWCOM for that. HWCOM specifically with the neighborhood health program does have students that are within the College of Medicine, and they go out into the community learning about their experiences, taking back that to the colleges and seeing how they can improve patient health care. Then we look at the health disparities and health equity section, and we can look to FIU's RCMI for that. Determining or biological social determinants of health and testing interventions, HIV and AIDS, substance abuse and diabetes, translational research, all of that goes into FIU CTS, Translational Science Center in Port St. Lucie, as well as the CCF at FIU. Now we look at our key players that are involved with this. We start with the NIH, or we start with the HHS, sorry, and then within HHS we go into NIH, so we can kind of think of that as, I learned this, they're called child agencies. So think of HHS as the big parent, NIH as the child, and then think of our other department that I'm going to be speaking about in a few moments as the grandchild of HHS. First and foremost, we have the NIH, which was the baby of HHS, right? We have it right here in the DC area in Maryland, and it's basically there to drive biomedical and public health research. Anything related to public health, anything related to the research that's associated to public health, we can look to the NIH. And their mission is turning discovery into health. Just look at it as a big medical research agency for the United States. Then we look to the NIH's baby, the ARPA-H. So ARPA-H is the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health. It can be parallel to what some people might know as DARPA, which is the same thing but for defense. And there's also an energy one. So ARPA-H is within the NIH, and the mission, it is a big mission, but I want you to take away these 3 words right here: catalyzing health breakthroughs. ARPA-H is something that is known as a department that is high risk, high reward. You want something done fast. You want something done when something like a pandemic breaks out, for example. You want those technologies to be able to be produced at a rapid pace, obviously within reason, and just making sure that you have the proper publication and research toward it first to go ahead and drive that research and that solution towards something that's very sudden, like a pandemic, like a natural disaster, and things like that. We look at the fiscal year for 2022. I included the American Rescue Plan because it does fall into emergency aid. So if you look through the super huge bill that lists everything that's under the American Rescue Plan, you'll notice that there is a section specifically for COVID-19 where it had to do with the advancement of vaccines at a very rapid pace in order to, stop the spread of COVID-19 and make sure that future pandemics are a thing of the past. NIH specifically within the budget has a $45 million budget. It was a $2 billion increase, $2 million increase, from last year, typo. And then lastly, we have ARPA-H within the NIH, and it was proposed fairly recently. So I know that President Biden proposed $6.5 billion over 3 years, but because it's a fairly new agency, they started out with $1 billion just to go ahead and get it passed, and then they're going to look for future developments and see where they have areas of growth. Last but not least, thank you very much, and I'll go ahead and take any questions. Yes?
Constructively, Rickle, you left out a couple important points of what you did during the semester advancing these priorities. Internal and external. She forgot. He was even in the meeting.
So what I specifically did for the collaboration between FIU and these agencies was meet with key FIU health heads, so people like Dr. Hill, Dr. Black from CTS, looking at the deans of the College of Medicine, so Dean Sandan, Dean Galarte of the College of Public Health, and Dean Strickland from the College of Nursing, just making sure that all of their priorities and what they feel are their pertinent areas of growth for FIU, see how that translates into what the NIH has proposed, because the NIH does things in terms of 5 years, so they actually just proposed one as of 2021 through 2026 on how the next 5 years will be able to advance public health and things like that, and we just wanted to see where that aligned with FIU's goals.
And externally, spending a few days last week.
Yes, the last week has been whirlwind, but very, very productive, I might say. We've been meeting with the Department of HHS, so we are actually coordinating a visit from the Assistant Secretary for Administration, Dr. Cheryl Campbell. She will be coming to FIU for a visit, and we'll be hosting a fireside chat with FIU trustee Chanel Rowe, just on diversifying the workforce and looking to get federally involved in the government workforce in general between students. She is also meeting with FIU leadership, so the leadership that I had just mentioned prior to this, they will be having like a roundtable meeting to just discuss FIU's priority areas of growth.
One of my classmates, well, Trustee Rowe,
Ah, yes.
well, she's in the class after me.
From FIU.
Anyone have any questions of Lily? my normal question, what would be your recommendations if we wanted to continue this?
There are a lot of key players involved, so make sure you stay very organized. I have a folder within folders for everything. Making sure to keep those relationships and connections alive because you never know when you'll be having to contact them for future things like visits, like things that come up for more areas of research to be funded or to just gain awareness. And yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
A couple of observations.
Wait, observations.
So so you're graduating and your degree is in what?
My degree is in biological sciences.
She graduates now.
Yeah, right.
14 days.
Just a few days.
Count it down.
Who knows? Soon.
So she'll be walking across it. One of the complexities with these things is the complexity of our own system. So it's always a challenge. So it will be a challenge for me to try to describe what neighborhood health is actually doing versus what neighborhood health is being sort of promoted as doing, right? So you have these complexities across these colleges, okay? And not everything, so when you go and talk with, if I would go and talk with each of the deans, I would get certain perspectives that partially fit with the reality, right? And so when you then are advocating for something like that, the more you understand the sort of complexities of the internal relationships, the better prepared you are to advocate for what may work best, right? So, as an example, neighborhood health works very well from an education perspective, but it has not met all the opportunities that may be there, right? And then, so I would not, for example, go to an agency and say neighborhood health is going to do ABC when I'm not certain that they're going to be able to do ABC. Sometimes not because of their own fault, sometimes because of the complexities of
Internal
circumstances.
across the different colleges. You'll find the same thing with a big organization like NIH, right? So the only piece is that when you're advocating for an institution like FIU, right? The more understanding you have of those complexities, the better you'll be able to choose what you think is going to be successful, right? And you're dealing with complex issues, right? Even disagreements as to what health disparities represents. Okay.
Yeah.
So there are some people that you have in there biology in terms of health disparities, and some people would say no, biology is not part of it. It's all environmental, right? And those type of things. But very well done. I just that piece of advice, if in the future
Of course.
you're advocating for any institution, the better your understanding, the better you are likely to walk through those minefields as to what to advocate for.
Good point. Up next, the State Department.
You listen like
It's a perception.
Which one is?
Human choose mind.
Just click to the right.
Do you need the other mic or?
No, I just passed. Hello, my name is Joaquin Menendez, and I'm an international relations major.
Hello, my name is Felix Martinez. I'm a criminal justice student with a focus in national security. So our project was advocating for the Security Research Hub, but to understand what our project is, we have to understand what is the Security Research Hub. The Security Research Hub is an open source platform partnered with FIU, specifically the Jack D. Gordon Institute, to bring open source research to not just the United States through Southcom, but also to Latin American and Caribbean countries and our allies, think tanks, government and non-government organizations, those kind of groups. The Security Research Hub focuses on a variety of topics, but I highlighted a few important ones here, especially with our relevant story maps, being extreme weather events such as the relatively recent Haitian earthquake, migration such as the current migration happening in Haiti due to crisis. I'm noticing a lot of Haiti trends here. Transnational crime organizations, drug trafficking, firearm trafficking, things like that, and political stability. The platform serves as a repository of data, basically. Students, like us actually, go out and we find information, not just things like news articles or think tanks, but official documentation and policy. Thinking the United Nations, official government documents, things like that, to put on the website. So if you're looking for, let's say, what is the Venezuelan response to migration, you're gonna find articles from the UN, from Venezuela, from the nearby countries, and other things like that. Now, what can we do for the Department of State? There were two main aspects we want to focus on for the project. The first one being that our research can help forward the Department of State in their goals, specifically the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs, which focuses on, not read off the PowerPoint, basically focuses on furthering Western Hemisphere prosperity, not just in the Northern Hemisphere, but in the Southern Hemisphere specifically. The Department of State has a variety of roles. It acts as a diplomat service. It handles funds between countries, but also handles the role of advising companies in Latin America, especially on recent topics. Our goal with the Security Research Hub, partnering with them, was to provide our sources, our data to the Department of State for their betterment.
So, why the Department of State? It's a very important question to see what exactly SRH has to do for the Department of State in relation to the government as well as in the local area for Miami. Considering that Jack D. Gordon Institute has programs that allow for students both in the IT and in foreign policy fields to utilize what they know, their knowledge and their passions, to make research investigations as to certain crises that are occurring in neighboring or allied countries. And so the hub allows not only for local students in Miami, but also for students in other countries and allied countries from Argentina all the way up to Mexico to coordinate with different university networks with their documentation and their research. But not only that, it provides a repository, as previously mentioned, for the Department of State to get more of an open source insight. They have obviously many different agents and many different actions and activities. But if it allows for younger students and a younger pool of potential recruitment that the Department of State can utilize, even if it's just for a more fundamental or basic grasp of the current crises in those situations. And so the hub not only provides a tool for youth and for students to gain knowledge and understanding of the current crisis in other countries and to add on to that already available knowledge, it increases cooperation between different universities across the Western Hemisphere and allows for the Department of State, allows for new sort of development in the workforce to provide for the Department of State itself. And so the advocacy goals and the way that we in the past semester had been working towards this and building the sort of building the connections we have with the BWHA is by contacting leaders and officials who have knowledge of this and expressing this sort of what we can do with the events from SRH as well as certain already conducted research that our past students and alumni have done. We've expressed this and shared this with people who worked in the Department of State or have relations already with JGI. And we create sort of these contacts so we can further cement them and have the next sort of a cohort of students who wish to continue to express the success of SRH to people in the Department of State here in DC as well as back in Miami. So I guess to end it off here. This is what our one-pager looked like that we shared around before.
This would be the part for any questions.
All I can say about that.
So your list of advocacy goals where it was like create a contact list, create those connections, all of those were successful.
To an extent, let's say.
Yeah.
The main challenge of the Department of State is that they're very busy people. We didn't get a lot of answers when it came to things. Our project initially started off with, hey, we have a list of people, let's contact them. They've already visited FIU, they've talked to us in the past, let's follow up with them, basically. We followed up with them, we didn't get very good answers. So the project then shifted a bit towards working with FIU partners. We had an event planned November 15th, where basically they were going to host here a few delegates from different think tanks, agencies, and they were basically going to talk about the SRH. I believe the topic was going to be specifically firearms trafficking. So we were going to extend an invitation to the Department of State officials and say, hey, we're hosting this, why don't you come on over and give it a try? And that then turned into creating a new list. Some people moved on. The contacts we did have weren't really going anywhere, so that's why we changed to creating a new list for the Department of State and the Bureau.
And also to answer that question, since this is the first time that JDI students had come here as well, it was very difficult because we didn't have as many contacts in DC as they do already back in Miami. Most of the contacts we do have are United Southern Command. For example, Brian Fonseca works with those people there. However, here it's more about people who have been in Southern Command who are currently in DC. And so when we had originally planned was that they would come here for November 15th to host an event. And originally I got people from AI who would be willing to come down. But unfortunately, because of scheduling on their behalf, there wasn't much we could do for November 15th. So instead, we maintained the list, and perhaps for the next cohort that comes in the spring, they can continue on with that to build it up the same way that we have that y'all have been doing already.
You answered my follow-up.
Yeah.
Question. Since you're focusing on basically Western Hemisphere, are you also, would you ever cross the idea of trying to get more partnerships with Northcom?
I knew that question was going to come. So, we have heard briefly on it. We are students, so we don't have the inside scoop, but they do keep the things very secret by nature due to the agencies that our group works with. But to my knowledge, the main thing is that right now it's a Southcom sponsored project, so we have clear lines of communication to Southcom and then their area of influence, which is Latin America. I believe they are looking into Central Command and Northern Command, but that's likely going to be a year-long process just because of how the bureaucracy works and things like that. So,
Thank you.
Any recommendations? Well, Marion, you had your hand up. No. Any recommendations you have moving forward?
I guess the recommendation would be that for the next students that are going to be taking up the challenge of working directly with things like the Department of State or even intelligence officials in general, is that you need to be careful, because obviously the work that they do and the way that they go about it is very clandestine to begin with. That's the nature of it. So it is very important to maintain direct contact and updating people who work in JGI like Brian Fonseca and Alexander, because they're the ones that have the contacts, the legitimacy to do so. The random students, unfortunately, especially in the context of the State Department, they're not going to get that much traction. What's important is that you do the work to then give it to them to then use their connections, because that's kind of how it works in that field of management. But I guess, yeah, the recommendation is keep updating the people who are at the top in that field. Don't just try to one-man army all of yourself. So, yeah.
Good advice. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least.
One last presentation. Oh, her Sophie and Roxana. One is out and the other one's stuck in my. So they'll present next class.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Alejandra Matiz.
My name is Marian Balseiro.
Hello? Oh, okay, now it works. My name is Marian Balseiro. I'm a sophomore studying international relations and economics. And so it's Ale, even though she did not mention it. And our project had to do with trying to get a memorandum of understanding with the OAS and FIU, and to kind of promote and advocate for research initiatives. Alejandra will talk more about that when she introduces why we're doing this project.
Thank you. Okay. So as Marian mentioned, both of us are studying international relations and economics with a focus on economic development in the Latin American region. So we felt it was appropriate to embark on this project where we are trying to establish a memorandum of understanding with the OAS. The reason why this partnership would be important to us and to FIU is not only would it lead to more development in this area regarding the Latin American region, since FIU does have multiple institutions that focus on the same objectives that the OAS has, such as peace and security studies, democratic development, economics, and environmental sustainability, etc. And the way that we embarked on the project initially was we met with the director of social inclusion of the OAS, and she's also an FIU alumni, Betilde Munoz. Here is a photo of us meeting. It was led by Carlos. He was there with us. And this was a very exciting opportunity because we got firsthand insight as to what establishing a memorandum of understanding would lead. And the most important outcome, I believe, that Betilde mentioned was it's important to establish a precedent before moving on to that memorandum of understanding. So building different panels or different events with the OAS in partnership with different leaders, different institutions with FIU, to then use that precedent to move on to the memorandum of understanding.
Aside from meeting with the OAS, we also wanted to kind of like further partnerships and strengthen our institutions within FIU. So within FIU, we have SIPA, the Stephen J. Green for Public and Foreign Affairs. We also have the Kimberly Green School, which is the Latin America Center, and CASE, Jack Gordon Institute, etc., that work directly with Latin America and the issues that we present. Examples of research right now would be the REACH network, which has to do with social health inclusion, and we also have like street gangs and Central America Research Initiative. So we kind of wanted to keep meeting with these institutions to see how we can like partner with the private sector and also government, Congress, etc. So, for example, we met with Guillermo Arias, a representative from the Latin American Governmental Relations of BMW, so we can sort of like start conversations where we include the private sector and the public sector as well as institutions like FIU that focus on academic research. So we met with Anthony Pereira as well, the new director of the LAC Center, and we had some very productive talks that led to some funding as well for Latin American Caribbean series that will be taking place next year, and I will talk about that later. Now we're going to be talking about funding.
So as Marian said, we'll be talking about the funding that we received later on. This is in terms of funding that the OAS receives from the United States. So the OAS receives funding through voluntary contributions from member states. In the U.S., it's through the Department of State from the contributions to international organizations, the CIO part of the budget, that the U.S. provides funding for international organizations. Within that is included UN special agencies. So for the budget for 2023, the Biden administration requested $1.6 billion for this, from which the overall amount would be $692 million for the UN regular budget. So from those $692 million, funding would be allocated to the OAS. It wasn't specified how much exactly would go to the OAS directly.
Like mentioned before, we are trying to look for more partnerships, not only just with the OAS, but also with other institutions, and has to do with the research in Latin America and the Caribbean. This is one of the wordings we use to our pitches. So Florida International University is not only a leading research institute in climate change, security, health, and resilience, but also the largest cluster of students, faculty, and ongoing research from or focused in Latin America and the Caribbean. So that piece of information is kind of what's been driving all of our progress, since that is kind of our identity as FIU. We also, when we talk to BMW, AT&T, OAS, etc., we discuss a series of issues that are pertinent to the research that we do at FIU. For example, nearshoring, economic partnerships with the Caribbean, like Felix and Joaquin were mentioning, arms trading, Haiti, etc. And these are crucial in our understandings of not only what we want to partner with, and we want to focus our Latin American Caribbean series that's going to be happening next year and that already started, which I'm going to talk about later, but also how we can better our own topics. What are we focusing on when it comes to the Caribbean? What are these plans that we want to look into? So again, transnational trade, migration. We talked with Batilda that migration was one of the biggest things that we should focus on in our research, and we're a pretty migratory school, if we can mention that. And so I guess what's next? There we go. So this is the meeting that we had last week during the opening. We met with very important stakeholders from the U.S. Department of Commerce. We also met with USAID, Anthony Pereira from the LAC Center, and we also met with the Heritage Foundation. So we had a lot of different insights, and we thankfully had to be a part of that, and we get to talk about all the topics that matter in the region. So basically, that's going to be major convenings that will take place in DC with this series, and we're going to be, again, meeting people from all over the place. And when it comes to the AES?
When it comes to the OAS, more unofficial partnerships are expected to be made with them. Strategic collaborations will take place with the goal of a model of understanding in mind eventually. I want to emphasize what you were saying. It's important to keep some level of objectivity, if you will, within these topics since they are so controversial. And we got to witness that directly in this meeting. There were so many opposing views in all of these topics. So it's important to make it a space for dialogue and different opinions so that these partnerships can be made without any limiting the amount of bias.
Yeah, and lastly, we wanted to talk about what's next for FIU. So we want to enhance our research, basically not only through these collaborations, but also funding that can help the LAC Center that's been doing a lot of cool stuff lately with language, Brazil, etc. We also want to, kind of like what I mentioned before, look at what are the areas that really need the most help right now and what our strengths are in enhancing that research. And thank you so much.
Any questions? Classic question. I know. Well, you already know what I'm gonna ask, so why don't you answer that?
So I would say the biggest thing for me was Batilda's point in approaching smaller tasks to building to the bigger goal. So it's important to, it would have been a cooler opportunity if we had had this information earlier on in our process so that we could have focused perhaps more on what kinds of events can we set up, what kinds of leaders can we bring in, being more specific about the certain goals that we can reach so that we can tackle that bigger goal in the future. So this was definitely a great starting point, I would say, so that hopefully in the future another Hamilton Scholar can come in and be more precise within these goals.
And I really agree with your point. I think that it was crucial for us to set up that foundation because a lot of these meetings and convenings are going to be happening next year. So I guess the future Hamilton Scholar, please enjoy these events and make sure to take those connections also individually because since a lot of it has to do with partnerships, we are students and we're going to probably be doing future research maybe. So I guess take those partnerships with you and don't let them die in the moment. Any other questions?
Now, there was a pivot in your original plan, because I believe you both were going to be first focused on the Summit of the Americas.
Right, yes. But I guess the wording around that changed a little bit.
Why?
Because the Summit of the Americas, by a lot of the partnerships we looked into, was deemed to be not very successful. I guess that's also one of the views that she was talking about that could be biased, that could be political, when doesn't necessarily have to be. I believe the Summit of the Americas also has a lot of ground to grow. A lot of the partnerships, Los Angeles Migration Treaty, as well, not treaty, initiative, and also the Americas for Economic Partnership. That's going to be taking place, the outcomes of that throughout next year. So I guess there's still a lot of time to wait and see. But I guess it does go around to show how the wording and basically objectives change according to who we partner with, maybe.
Any other questions? Are we good? All right, let's
Thank
give
you.
a round of applause.
Overall impression, sir?
great. I'm very impressed with all the work that you're doing, and you're dealing with, very complex issues, okay? Particularly this issue of Latin America, FIU has, we have a lot of thumbs, fingers, toes in different places in Latin America, but it's a lot by individual faculty, right? And we've never really have been able to sort of take advantage of the relationships that exist, right? So on the political science side of things, there are many faculty members that have had projects in Colombia and other places, and relationships with universities in different countries in Latin America, but it's never been leveraged for other things that we do. So as an example, like the Dean of Public Health is doing a lot of stuff on Alzheimer's in Colombia, right? Has he ever had a discussion with LAC on that? Or does LAC even know that they're doing that in Colombia, right? And that's, so one project may be how to sort of like connect those different pieces within FIU internally to understand all the things that we're doing, so that then they can be what I would say more sort of rational plan idea of how to have a larger impact, right? So the people in the Hurricane Center are doing things right around earthquakes in Haiti and all those things. So we have a lot of relationships that are based on individuals, but the institution itself has not put it together. Okay? And it's not easy, because I've tried and I have failed. All right? So,
I've tried and I have failed.
yes.
And you have tried and you have
There you go.
But I want to add that point. In the world of advocacy,
Mhm.
your dream event didn't happen, but you built an amazing list.
Yeah.
You pivoted where you were going, and that's a part of it. Nothing is black and white and locked in a box, So you got to be able to be nimble and on top of it. And I think each of these groups, proved that you kind of ran with the way that they were, hitting the ball out.
And these things vary, right? OAS was probably a lot more relevant before all of you were born. Those things. The Summit of the Americas at some point was a big deal, right? So
Great NAFTA.
politics,
Great NAFTA.
Yeah. So those things vary with the politics of the time.
Way to go.
Well, thank
Thank you for
Happy to
joining
go
us.
somewhere else.
We'll have Dr. Hill is here. I'm gonna walk him out, sure.
So,
going?
as we wrap up, I know that we have
All
a
right.
couple presentations that didn't happen, so we'll just do that Monday.